money controversy here in Rhode Island continues.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
I seek a journalistic perspective this evening on the latest with the state of Rhode Island and IGT, the governor, her administration, Twin River, its management. It's not just now a fight over $1 billion worth of contract and 20 years worth of cash flow. It's now about who said what to whom and what muscle may have been exacted on another. Ted Nesi is here to help me work through this little bit. And of course, there are other couple things going on in the state that are worthy of our discussion, no doubt. But in the meantime, good Thursday evening to you. You may have heard there's this significant thing happening in Washington. Headline on IT Network's latest at early afternoon press time.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
The House has passed a resolution laying out the ground rules for the impeachment process going forward.
What is at stake in all of this is nothing less than our democracy.
The resolution calls for open hearings and allows the president's legal team to question witnesses, but Democrats can strip that right if President Trump does not cooperate with the investigation. The White House says the process is already tainted because of the closed-door hearings underway.
Why have some of this in secret and then just come out and selectively leak? No, they can't do anything that would make this investigation legitimate.
Congressional investigators continue to question witnesses behind closed doors. Today, they're talking to the president's top Russia advisor who just stepped down from his White House job.
Tim Morrison arrived on Capitol Hill early this morning. Bill Taylor, the top diplomat in Ukraine, testified last week that it was Morrison who warned him the president doesn't want to provide any military assistance at all to Ukraine. Taylor said he found that extremely troubling. Democrats say they now want to hear from former National Security Advisor John Bolton. His lawyer tells CBS News he will not come voluntarily, but he may comply if subpoenaed.
I think he's absolutely going to comply if subpoenaed. I think he's looking for the cover of subpoena to comply. And that makes perfect sense to me. You know, Republicans argue about process here. At the end of the day, they're going to have to acquiesce to some substance because the Democrats, maybe tardy for some, have fully voted now on an open process. And if you liken that what has happened behind closed doors to a grand jury proceeding, that is incredibly secret, right? I think at some juncture, they may have to just switch gears and say, all right, look, he did it. But it's not impeachable, which is probably a more constructive argument to be having than arguing that the whole thing is all screwed up. Ted Nesi's here to talk about some local issues, but I'm sure you've got thoughts as an American and as a journalist on this whole thing.
Yeah, I think I read a column yesterday by someone suggesting the same thing. Jonah Goldberg suggested the same thing, that the Republicans, basically need to seek higher ground to fight from on this battle because so much evidence is coming out that the president did, not want the money to go to Ukraine because he wanted to tar Joe Biden. And I think, Bill Clinton, it's instructive to look back. Bill Clinton, how did he survive impeachment? Partly because he eventually came forward, apologized for his conduct with Monica Lewinsky, but said, as you said, Dan, but it's not impeachable. I'm sorry, forgive me, let me keep being your president. And that allowed his defenders in the Democratic Party to say, the president screwed up, he admits it, we condemn his conduct, but we don't need to remove him from office and overturn an election.
Well, I think what's going to be key to that is whether he moves away from his repetitive reflection on the call is perfect. He's going to, at some juncture, there's no way they can veer away from him if he's maintaining the perfection of the phone call. I would think that at some point he's just going to have to do the old come clean and say, look, all right, listen, I've never read the Constitution. I don't know what right and wrong is. But I guess you're telling me what I did wasn't so perfect. So, all right, is it impeachable?
Or you find someone to throw under the bus. Presidents, governors, people do that, right? You say, oh, I've got very bad advice on how we should
Well,
handle
it's not
this.
that this president has ever thrown any of his people under the bus.
Right.
It seems like there's a pile of them under the bus. Once they leave, they go directly under the bus.
Yeah.
Anyway, it'll be fascinating. In the meantime, here is the latest on a really now messy situation at the State House.
The fight between IGT and Twin River seems to be getting uglier by the day. Now, Raimondo Chief of Staff Brett Smiley is being accused of threatening to use the power of the state to silence Twin River. Twin River Executive Vice President Mark Crisafulli says his phone rang on June 27th. On the other end, Governor Raimondo's Chief of Staff, Brett Smiley. In a letter to the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Crisafulli recalled that Smiley gave an ultimatum. Don't voice opposition to legislation that would greenlight a $1 billion contract extension with IGT, or else Twin River would suffer regulatory consequences. The call came as Twin River was preparing to launch a public campaign to kill the IGT deal.
I have talked to my chief of staff more than once. He assures me that there was no threat.
Governor Gina Raimondo calls this a distraction by Twin River at a crucial time.
This happened however many months ago, and you hear about it on the last night of testimony. It's just, to me, seems like another stunt to try to distract from the issue at hand.
The state GOP has been a vocal critic of the IGT legislation.
And if there's corroborating evidence of Mark Crisafulli's allegations, then Mr. Smiley needs to go immediately.
Senate President Dominic Ruggiero is expressing frustration at all of this back and forth, saying in a statement in part, "We need to stop the finger pointing and work together to find an amicable resolution for all parties for the benefit of the people of Rhode Island." As for Smiley, he denies he ever threatened Twin River in that June phone call, but acknowledges the conversation was tense.
One of the things that's, I mean, how much can you pack into a report, right? Tim got it all on the money there. The House Speaker also weighed in and more or less just condemned the Raimondo administration for the perceived threat. The Speaker would like nothing better than to lift focus from his office to the governor's office right now, given the indictment of one of his...
And of course, we've never seen House Speakers make any sort of threats or anything to get legislation passed in Rhode Island.
Never.
Couldn't imagine it.
What's your executive summary on this? Then we'll dig into it.
I think you're right. You know what you said. It's really messy now. This entire conversation. I mean, this is the underlying thing here is a contract for services to the state lottery, an important big contract. I don't want to diminish it. That's now become threats and constitutional fights and all this going on. I mean, I think, I think what I've been thinking about the last 24, 48 hours is I don't see right now how this ends, right? So very clear the governor's IGT deal is not going to get a floor vote this year. Hard for me to see her version of the deal getting a final vote, period.
This year being this
calendar year? Yeah, before the end of 2019. That's what all lawmakers are saying. That's on the table.
There's no special vote coming.
So that means we're kicking this issue into 2020. And that means we're going to get every day, we'll get a little closer to the filing deadline for elections. Reps and senators will get more nervous about taking votes they're not sure about. I guess I'd been expecting at some point either Mattiello or Ruggiero or both or Raimondo would bring Twin River and IGT into a room and said, enough, like we have to stop all this public battling, like what do we have to do to make everyone come out and have a kumbaya press conference and end this thing? But based on what happened yesterday with Twin River accusing Brett Smiley of this threat, they don't seem any closer to that. Now, politics can change, and there's always ways to make people happy, but it's real, like you said, it's very messy.
Well, it's messy on X number of levels, Ted. You're right on the money. By the way, I've been opining for weeks now that the governor has just, again, missed the broad side of the barn on managing a major economic and controversial matter, that all she should be doing is driving those parties into a conference room, buying a bunch of pizza and a case of beer and saying, don't come out until you're full drunk or got a deal.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like...
And that she couldn't do that then, and every day that's passed where she has not been able to do that, and she's decided that she's going to demean Twin River's management, she moves further and further away from being able to get them resolved on what were their original, probably satisfactory places, and that is that Twin River wants a bigger piece of the action and more discretion over how the machines operate on their floor, because of course they have a financial piece of that, right?
Yeah, and I think that at this point, you know, even if you take the the best case scenario of this phone call situation for Brett Smiley, no, he admits there was a tense call between him and Christopher, as you'd expect when they were already getting ready to battle, so much money on the line. Twin River, I'm sure, had telegraphed their plans for a public fight against this. Even if he just said, hey, wait a minute, like, do you really want to torch our relationship? You need us, we need you, and not a threat so much as just a statement of fact. The Raimondo administration knew going into this that a major company with a lot of important state house lobbyists with good connections at the state house who were going to be listened to by lawmakers was going to come out and say this deal is bad. They were going to put a lot of money behind it. Where was the plan?
The deal between the state and IGT.
Yes.
And the tentative new deal for IGT.
Right. And so where was the plan from the administration to counter that? Maybe they'd say they had a plan and it just wasn't effective, but I think you just can't argue. I think Twin River, you can't say otherwise. They have won the public relations battle for the most part on this for months.
It seems like the governor is going to have to decide about how to get this now, I don't know, for lack of a better term, my word, threat, retribution problem off the desk. We'll talk about that next.
He threatened me on June 27th. He called me. He said exactly what I said he said. I have contemporaneous notes that I took at the time, and I have my cell phone records. And what's more important, Gene, is just look at what happened after June 27th.
Okay.
Did we have a regulatory problem, or did they help us? On May 10th, we issued $700 million of debt. May 10th is long before we opposed the deal and before the threat happened. On June 27th, we get the threat. All of a sudden in August, we have a problem on a regulatory basis with the debt that we issued on May 10th that the state approved on May 10th.
His chronology is pretty tight.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, I asked Mr. Christofouli 10 days ago on the radio, do you think that the reason that you got tagged for near a couple $100,000 in a fine and then were, you know, induced and negotiated to, you know, kick up another $12, then $24 million for renovation, which, by the way, is most likely protocol. I mean, they've got to reinvest in the facility. There's no doubt about it. Their kick up over the IGT deal, he said, absolutely. You know, well, he said, you know, it speaks for itself. I think the governor's got a situation here where she's got to stop denying things and start looking into things and being more informed. Do you find them operating in a vacuum as much as I do? It just seems like they listen to their own echo chamber in the administration way too much. There's an arrogance of disconnect there, and she doesn't seem to have the kind of advice and perspective that she needs.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. You know, it's going to be November tomorrow, and she's in her first year of her second term, and you know, I would say it's not been a great year for her. You know, she comes off. You know, she had a pretty decent first year as governor, despite winning with only 40% or whatever the original election. She got her whole budget, she got her economic development tools, she was getting along pretty well with the assembly. You would think that perhaps coming to the second term with a much stronger mandate in last fall's election, that they would have tried to seize on that, might have had some momentum. Instead, they got, you know, pretty demolished at the assembly, didn't get a lot of what they wanted on their top priorities, and now their whole second half of the year has been consumed by this food fight between the two gambling companies, which I think for a lot of Rhode Islanders, it goes over their heads. They just don't really love it. They might not understand all the details of this deal. They're just sort of like, I don't like all this.
And they're being bombarded with advertising in print and electronically, you know, from the two companies, more so IGT in the last month than Twin River.
Agreed.
Trying to convince the people to convince their legislators to pursue this deal. We'll talk about the deal itself in a second. I just think that this is not something that can be swept under the rug. Anytime, you know, a major business, any business, but certainly the major business of Twin River is the conveyor and commission holder for the largest non-taxable source of revenue for the state, cries foul about retribution and regulation, it has to be investigated. I don't know that our system is well set up for it. I don't know that House oversight has the kind of power, let alone skill set, to be able to get this this kind of thing done. And so someone's going to have to file some kind of a complaint with the Attorney General's office, seems to me, for at least some kind of cursory review of this, which may be preempted by Mr. Smiley saying, you know what, I was out of line, I'm going to leave. But of course he's got a situation because he has his eyes fixed on City Hall in Providence. He wants to be the next mayor. And she may want to protect him there. And so it's a tangled web woven that she's going to have to get some outside advice on, not inside advice.
Yeah, the other thing is, look, there is an underlying issue there, you know, the regulatory problem. And I that was my first thought, certainly, when I learned of this settlement with Twin River last week over their debt, which is what Christopher was referring to in the radio there. You know, they did borrow a bunch of money and then engage in some other transactions. There are limits on Twin River's debt in their agreements with the state because, don't forget, a decade ago, Twin River, the old version of Twin River, went bankrupt. And so the state wanted them not to get, you know, deeply leveraged again. I have to say, I'm a business reporter. I'm not too bad of a business reporter. It's extremely hard for me to make heads or tails of who's right about whether they had borrowed more than necessary, whether they got you need someone with real expertise to look at that. Was there an underlying problem here?
It's always a resolvable issue by negotiation, which it ended up getting resolved by negotiation. But what Twin River is alleging is that the rug was kind of pulled out from under because there was an ongoing consent for the leverage that they had taken out, and then all of a sudden they got whacked for it.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the chronology of events, it probably all spells out to be true. I don't think the people of Rhode Island should be standing for this kind of unanswered question, and so there's going to have to be some answers on this. On the deal itself, it's kind of peculiar, isn't it, that nobody at the General Assembly sees it the way the governor is trying to articulate it, and I happen to agree with her, that this is just a continuation of an economic development deal with IGT. Certainly worth the scrutiny, has to be constitutionally approved, and maybe shaved down. That she's emotionally all in on this thing, again, tin-eared. I don't think we have to be in a bidding process, and believe me, Twin River would acquiesce to no bid if they got a little bit more piece of the action. Now, though, they've got big eyes and big tummies over the idea that they can run a whole gaming operation in the state, bringing on all these partners because they're all revved up, and we'll see if their momentum can be calmed. You think?
Yeah, I mean, they have, they also have outside owners. They went public earlier this year, Twin River did, and that means Wall Street now wants to see growth. They want to see revenue growth. Some of their longer standing owners may be looking for an exit, a payday, to get out of ownership and pocket their profits on that. And so they want to see strength back in their biggest market here in Rhode Island. I think there is probably, like it or not, there's always a deal that could be cut, right? And right now, I think in some ways, I'm keeping a close eye on Senate President Ruggiero because everything at the State House now becomes a Mattiello versus Raimondo fight, right? Everything, their Cold War seems to overshadow everything, and people pick sides. He seems to be distant enough from the two sides. He knows everybody involved.
And he's got a pretty sharp guy in Connolly, the House Finance Chairman, who, by the way, we taped this in the early afternoon. At 3 o'clock today, Bill Connolly was in studio with me. As I tape it, he's coming up, but as you're seeing it, it already happened. But we'll talk about this because I think they played a very responsible role in the Paw Sox review, and then the whole thing went.
Yeah, I mean, the Senate Finance Committee, you have Senator Connolly chairing it, Senator Pearson, Senator DePalma. You have multiple senators on there who are very smart, who are hardworking, who ask good questions. You also have a good Senate fiscal staff, and they have put a lot of time into this. I've just as a reporter learned quite a bit just about how we structure the lottery operations in round. So I think I think it's important that we don't think that just because there's a public fight, the IGT deal shouldn't have gotten this level of scrutiny. If you're locking the state into something for 20 years, $1 billion over that time needs a ton of scrutiny.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if most of the public conversation has not necessarily mirrored the sort of calm discussion that we've seen at Senate Finance with charts and facts and things like that. It's just been this food fight.
And the whole thing, hinges on the jobs, right? So is IGT really going to, in 3 years, pull out of Rhode Island if they don't have the full deal that they have here? Even if they win a bid to run the lottery, they say they only need 60 employees to do so versus the 1,000 they have downtown running their international operations. So,
and what do the Italians think, right? IGT is now controlled by a company in Italy, and there's some people in London. How much are they willing to go through here in Rhode Island for these 1,000 jobs? How lucrative is the contract, et cetera? We really, they're not going to give that away, but what are the conversations behind the scenes? Are they like, oh, this is so lucrative, we'll fight this for a while or not?
But also operationally, you know, it's not easy to take all the brain trust that's developed here in Rhode Island and just move it.
True. Absolutely.
You know,
so you're not going to get every employee to leave for Reno.
But I agree with you. I don't know how this is going to end. And she doesn't seem to be magnanimous enough to be able to get on top of it. Now she's embroiled in a controversy with her own staffers, so she's got less juice. I don't know who the player is.
Well, it would not seem to be in her interest or the lawmakers' interest to have this drag on 2 more months into 2019, be the major discussion when the 2020 session kicks off. And usually we see, just real politic here, usually we see when that's what's happening. Why did roadwork suddenly pass in February 2016? Because the train was leaving the station and the House wanted it done as quickly as possible rather than closer to the election.
It's always an election calculation. Quick little thing on a state police matter next. I only have a couple of minutes here, but we've got this strange little controversy that is bothering our Rhode Island State Police with Lieutenant McKinney, who is claiming that he's got human rights violations as an African American, one of the few, I think the only in the command staff, right?
That sounds right.
At the State Police, saying he hasn't been moved to, head of investigations in the Detective Bureau because of discrimination. He's got a little bit of a story where he allegedly, whacked a detainee who was reportedly out of line, how it was processed, and now the complication of the resignation of Lieutenant Colonel Joe Philbin, who I've always found to be a pretty straight shooter, who reportedly supervised this situation or may have been involved in, or supposed to be involved in the processing of that whole incident. He's stepping out. Colonel Manning's asked the Connecticut State Police to come in and take an objective review of the place. Is this a bubbling problem or just something that is going to stay on a little simmer and resolve itself?
I think it's probably simmering, but you keep if the heat stays on, it could boil. I think it's. I think
this is something Manning inherited,
right?
But he did rearrange the entire staff, and the complaint is against Manning.
Yes, and I think that's part of what you see here. I mean, you've had a change of administration at the State Police with Colonel Manning coming in, replacing Colonel Asumpico, and often when you have a change of administration in any organization, there's a look back. The chickens come home to roost, for better or worse, of things that maybe were left.
You have better ideas, you think, on how to run a place.
Yeah, and personality conflicts. New guy, new team. Someone's not on the new team. They're not happy. You see things happen. I think, bringing the Connecticut State Police would seem to have been smart here because they need to be, especially in a state like Rhode Island that's small. I would say, it's instructive to look across the border at Massachusetts, where the state police is in a near meltdown. This is nothing compared to what they're seeing up there with multiple indictments and resignations and multiple different scandals going on at the same time. It's a reminder that, respected as the state police are in both states, they are human institutions as well that can have real conflicts and problems.
Yeah, I think well said. All right, we'll see. Thanks, man. Oh, happy Halloween, by the way.
Happy! I wore my orange for you, everybody.
The thing. She's, I'll give you the address. There's really good candy.
Yeah, exactly.
Final word when we come back. Alrighty, so I'll tell you, this mess at the State House has got to be resolved. We got to figure out whether or not the administration put the thumb on Twin River. It's not the kind of thing that you leave hanging up in the air. The people of the state deserve to understand what exactly went on there, and just resolving it by some kind of he said ain't good enough. It's just not. I'm not looking to poke a bear. I'm not looking to create trouble here. I'm looking for understanding, because we can't be operating in that kind of environment in this state. All right, tomorrow night, one of the leading progressive voices in the state on a multiple line of issues. We'll see you on the radio at 3 on WPRO. Good night.